Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. PNM veterans support Young as new leader. Religious groups condemn hate videos, call for unity. Rideshare driver abducted and robbed in Londonville. And internationally, Germany and France warn Trump over Greenland remarks. Now for the details. Two religious organizations, ASHA and the IFA or Orisa Council of Trinidad and Tobago, have strongly condemned recent online videos promoting hate and violence against religious communities. ASHA decried the desecration of a central Trinidad mosque and called for immediate arrest, labeling the act as Islamophobic and seditious. The group urged the government to publicly condemn the incident and uphold respect for all faiths. The IFA or Orisa Council criticized the misuse of their sacred beliefs in the videos and urged calm and rational decision-making to maintain peace and unity. Both groups emphasized the need for interfaith respect and decisive action from authorities to preserve the nation's harmony. Former Arima Mayor Ashton Ford says while Arima PNM members initially backed MP Penelope Beckles-Robinson for Prime Minister, they now fully support Stuart Young after his selection by the party's parliamentary caucus. Ford expressed confidence in Young's leadership, calling him competent and capable. He dismissed concerns about race or privilege, emphasizing that the PNM is a national movement inclusive of all. Ford criticized media narratives questioning Young's connection to the people, citing his active engagement with party members and constituents. He affirmed the PNM's commitment to democracy and its readiness to move forward under Young's leadership. A TT rideshare driver was abducted, assaulted, and robbed during a trip in Londonville on Monday evening. Around 5 p.m., the 46-year-old driver picked up a woman and her brother for a ride to the Aruka Health Facility. During the trip, the man pulled a firearm, forced the driver into the back seat, and later blindfolded her. The suspects, joined by a third accomplice, abandoned the driver on Depot Road and fled with her vehicle. Police later recovered the car in Barrett area. Investigations ongoing. Internationally, Germany and France have criticized U.S. President-elect Donald Trump for refusing to rule out military forces to seize Greenland, a Danish territory. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot emphasized the importance of respecting sovereign borders. Trump reiterated Greenland's strategic importance for U.S. security during a press conference, reigniting his 2019 interest in acquiring the island. Denmark, along with Greenland's leaders, has firmly stated the territory is not for sale. Greenland's Prime Minister, advocating for independence, declared that the island's sovereignty is non-negotiable. Meanwhile, Danish officials warn this could escalate into a major diplomatic crisis. Trump is set to be sworn in for his second term on January 20th. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Don't necessarily have a healthy understanding of our relationship with our government. And government doesn't just mean PNM, government means all of the various arms of government, arms of the state, as well as our relationships with our society. Now, there was a protest by the disabled community at the HDC head office in Port of Spain, where it seems as though, at least on the surface, the protest was successful. Now, I don't necessarily know all of the issues and all of the details to adequately and accurately judge the situation, who is right, who is wrong. But the point is, even if, let's just say that the protesters weren't 100% right or wrong, to some extent, they had a want, and they felt this was the only way to express it, and it forced the HDC to respond. Now, there's two things out of this that I wanted to talk about. One is the fact that I think it's a good thing that they were able to protest peacefully, and they were able to demand a response, and that the HDC responded. Not entirely sure if the response is adequate enough, and to some extent, the response is just the initial public relations message. What really matters in the totality of the response is what is implemented behind the messaging. And we have to wait and see about that. The HDC is saying that they do allocate homes to differently abled individuals, adhering to a clear and equitable process. Now, the million-dollar question in all of these things is it clear and equitable? Part of the issue is, and I think this is a recurring thing with regards to people in high office, how you perceive things to be free, fair, clear, transparent, equitable, etc., might not be how the public sees it. One of the interesting things, and I don't know to what extent this is true in other parts of the world, but whether it is a government body, the police, or private institution, an NGO, there seems to be a difficulty with regard to the distribution of information, right? We have Tobago's a tourism island. A lot of people don't even know what's there to do in Tobago, besides whatever they could find at Crown Point, besides the usual beaches that they go to, right? What about locally in Trinidad? Whenever there's what one could argue to be somewhat basic events by central institutions of our society, like the police, like a religious institution, which has numerous members that subscribe to it, adhere to it, or in the case of the police, to some extent interact with it. And yet, how many government programs that some people might say, hey, why we don't have this, why we don't have that, or even actively try to find them to participate and fail to do so, and yet the programs exist somewhere. So that's one issue there. The HDC could say that it's a clear and equitable process, but they need to understand, they're looking at it from their side, where they see everything behind the curtain. What do they have to ensure that it is clear and equitable, right? But then there's the statement that housing is not a privilege, it's a basic human right. I find that to be very, very tricky. Now, it is true the UN, I believe, recognizes housing as a basic human right. But then it goes on to go, like, it makes certain statements. Everyone has a right to own property. Everyone has a right to adequate housing. But what does that actually mean? When you say that you have a right to be protected against discrimination, you have a right to a free and fair trial, you have a right to equal opportunities, you have a right to privacy. Well, a right to privacy does not mean that if you're walking down the street, you could undress and then tell the rest of the public in the open air, hey, why you're looking at me, I have a right to privacy. So what does it mean with regards to the right of housing? Does the state have that responsibility? Do NGOs have that responsibility? Does the wider society have that responsibility? I think at the end of the day, it is a question of not to say, oh, well, it's a basic human right, and then expect somebody to figure it out. We as a society need to actively decide how we're going to do this, to what level we're going to do this. Particularly now when I'm afraid, look, there's a very reasonable possibility that there's a lot of excess waste that we could cut out and therefore be able to afford things that we need. And as a society, I am more than willing to say we need to ensure that those who cannot fend for themselves are looked after adequately. But I don't know if we could force the issue if we mismanage our situation. There are a lot of rights. We have a right to a free and fair society, but the question is, do we have that? So we could state that we have these rights, but we need to actually actively fight for them. And the thing with regards to differently abled people, one of the reasons why you fight for the rights of those who have less power than you, who have less advantages than you, who have less opportunities than you, is that you need to understand that due to human nature, if you allow precedents to be set, it's only a matter of time before it will be applied to you. It is, human beings are not static. And how society standards tend to not be static. It's one of the, it's good and bad. It's good because then it allows for change, positive change. It's bad because then it causes those changes to go too far. So there's always a balancing act, in part by different needs and the stakeholders and the spokespersons of those various needs. One will be the balancing act of responsible spending. The other will be the balancing act of, but we have people that need X, Y, and Z. And one would hope that we would have leadership that could come together and make the best decision. But the best decision is usually subjective based on the perspectives and opinions of whoever is making that determination. And then when you add, you would think, all right, well, more people need to weigh in on the matter. But then, of course, now that's where you get into the problem where you never get anything done. Which makes my call as a society, it might seem counterproductive, but to some extent, that's where you put on your big boy pants and say, look, we need to figure it out. We can't just be running around in circles and have all of these smaller, minor problems, leave them to fester into open wounds that come into big infections, and then you have to cut off the man's leg, rhetorically. Meanwhile, we can't handle what arguably are smaller scale issues. How are we going to handle the big things? Like the overall cost of living, like crime. But at the end of the day, kudos to this group of people that decided we're going to protest. Because I still don't understand how is it that we don't know how to effectively communicate to the wider society and the government. Protesting is one of those means. But then when we do protest, more often than not, it goes in the wrong direction. It's ineffective despite the best efforts of the people involved. And maybe that is on the flip side. We complain a lack of leadership by elected officials. What about a lack of leadership by the stakeholders, NGOs, organizations, lobby groups, special interest groups, which sometimes could be a double-edged sword, but we ain't reached that point yet, so let's look at them as a positive still. Where's the leadership from there? Where's the leadership? Where's the real leadership from some of these unions with regards to bettering the situations and the standard of living of their members, as opposed to whatever meets their agenda at the time, which doesn't always meet the needs or is in line with the best needs of its membership? Now we also have to wait and see, like I said before, if the HCC is going to play defense on this whole thing. But we have it highlights a transparency issue, a communication issue, and I think also just what we prioritize in our society, how we view the rights of human beings. One of the rights is freedom of religion, and in a state of emergency, things have gotten out of hand with regards to desecration. Why do we have that in TNT now in 2024? There's a lot that we have to fix But it's not simple things like fixing a pothole. It's obvious, it's a physical thing, and it's something that you know, well, we need whatever the mechanism to fix it, whatever the paperwork, whatever the resource allocation, whatever the physical labor, whatever the materials needed, whatever the process with regards to physics and chemistry. It's not so clear-cut with regards to problems of a society. All societies have problems. The issue is not whether you have problems or not. The issue is what are you actively trying to do to improve things and to fix it. All right, with that said, there's a lot to get through today. So we'll start right now with today's Daily Review. All right, so I'll just mention this so I could reiterate my stance, but we'll speak on this a lot more later in the show when I welcome my co-host. But it seems as though the PNM succession plan has hit a snag. There's a snafu, and I think ultimately I want to make this case. When I read that members of parliament did not want to sign a declaration that they were supporting Stuart Young, I was actually kind of flabbergasted. It's not that I didn't think that this was possible. It's the fact that I really did not expect, because according to reports, they were kind of rushed into this vote, and the whole situation about political leader was glossed over. I would have thought, because remember, politicians are not dumb, right? Politicians are not dumb now, they're smart people. I would have thought the obvious thing would be not just to ask about who is going to be Prime Minister when Dr. Keith Rowley resigns from Prime Minister, but also what's going to happen with the position of political leader. Because, obviously, now, the situation with Justin Trudeau is different. He's being forced out. He's being forced out. He can't hold on to nothing. Dr. Keith Rowley is not being forced out. So, I was judging the situation based on what was presented. And it is reasonable that if the MP still felt the need to support Dr. Keith Rowley, whether they were compelled or they volunteered that support, you could debate that, the possibilities of that, the legitimacy of that, etc., etc. If they still supported him, he could have maintained the position of political leader up until the expected interim elections in September. Whether or not the election, I would have hoped the general election would have been after, but it could have been before, and I could have been right back to where I started. But the point is, there was nothing in the law that said that he had to step down as political leader, as far as I'm aware, right? Usually, what we saw in the UK was the political leader was the prime minister, and they were forced out, so they could hold on to anything. But Dr. Rowley is voluntarily resigning. He could have held on to the position of political leader if the party members thought, and by members I mean the MPs, maybe the cabinet, maybe the entire parliamentary caucus, thought that this was the best, most stable way to do it. Or if he had enough influence to basically force his way through. But it seems that is not the case. So I am besides myself thinking, you mean to tell me that you all did a vote without fully understanding the implications of the vote? And then the further implications of that is, how many times does this happen when you all meet in cabinet? When you all don't fully understand what it is that you all are voting for? I would just like to know. But that's a more pie-in-the-sky argument maybe, right? I'm kind of speculating there. The main thing is, I am besides myself that this whole reportedly, allegedly, situation that led to 11-9 split between Stuart Young and Penelope Beckles of who's going to be the next prime minister for the remainder of the term, because again, it's reported that the members who voted on it did not think that they were voting for who's going to be the next political leader. They thought that that will be something to be determined soon, and Stuart Young will just be the prime minister in the interim. So, I just can't, to use such a low-level trick to get this vote through, to just not, by omission, not say what's going on with the political leadership of the PNM, not have that as part of the discussion, I mean, what else are you talking about there? How long did this take? Was this a 15-minute session? Because it doesn't take that long to go, what about the political leadership of the party? When is that going to be settled? What's the time frame for that? Because the fact of the matter is, I was prepared to say publicly, all of the complaints are convoluting the political leadership with the post of prime minister. Those are two separate things. The needs of one is not the needs of the other. Because I thought the PNM actually had a plan where, at least amongst themselves, they figured it out, but by reports they have not. So I'm actually, believe it or not, I am shocked by the carelessness, the foolishness, the lack of thoughtfulness in how this went down. It's a low-level trick. Let's not talk about that right now. Don't mention it. Don't let them think about it, the political leader post. We need to settle this thing. We need to settle this thing now. And then reportedly, it's come out that the MPs who don't want to sign are saying, well, why do we have to settle this now? You're not resigning until March. Let's talk about this more. What is the rush? That's it? You're going to try and rush it through? It's a low-level strategy that I don't understand how this happened. And I'm not going to some extent, I'm not even looking to blame the Prime Minister for doing it. I'm looking to blame the MPs who, I guess, got caught with their pants down. The world was pulled over their eyes by such a low-level, basic, unsophisticated strategy of communication. I don't understand. You're government people. You're supposed to be at a higher level than that. Is this what goes on in our politics? Does it happen in other political parties? Anyway, moving on. Next story, I just wanted to mention this quickly. Opposition MP, let me just get her full name here. Michelle Benjamin, Maruga Tableland. She says UNC does not need a facelift. I find that very hard to believe. You're facing a two-term incumbent that should not be popular just because it's a two-term incumbent, right? That's losing, what I guess you could say, the stabilizing factor of Dr. Heath Rowley. And I still don't think anybody is saying, oh, well, the UNC has the advantage in the election. In a case where the polls did not look upon the opposition any more favorably than government. And in fact, the latest NACTA poll revealed that the public did not necessarily trust the political leader of either party, and it's the PNM who is moving on from its political leader one way or the other, and UNC who is holding fast. So you have a poll that says the public doesn't necessarily like the leadership of either party. The other party is changing its leadership one way or the other. You are saying, nah, we're cool, we're good. I don't know about that one. And I hesitate to say, as much as I just kind of I just took to task the judgment of some of the members of the government. At the end of the day, the opposition's slate does not, it's not as though it stands up better than, it's comparatively superior. Please tell me how, because in parliamentary debates, most opposition members don't really account themselves that well. The government kind of wins some of these things if you want to judge it kind of by default. So I don't get it. This is an important election. You're like, you know, we're going to continue how we went. Well, how you went the last time you lost. You are literally saying the only reason why we are going to win is because people like the PNM less. Not because we tried to improve. Not because we did better. Because the last time you weren't considered better. You were considered bad enough to not win. Why should we accept that as the government in waiting? That doesn't make sense. Yes, I understand, you know, the lesser of two evils, but at some point, I might rather consistency over change for the sake of change if it's just as bad. Where is the sense of urgency of wanting to do right for the population? This, to some extent, kind of angers me because it speaks to potentially a level of laziness and carelessness that I don't understand. Are the political relationships that important that you don't care what it means for the rest of the country? Dr. Muhammad said it best. If you really cared about being loyal to the leader or loyal to the country or loyal to the party, you would do what is best for those things, especially the country, but also to some extent including the party and its leader. But if everybody wants to hold on to their seat, well, all right, you lost last time. Good luck next time. I don't think it's automatic that if the TPP wins in Tobago, they're going to go your way. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, hopefully we'll welcome my co-host. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
And I find that was the still.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much
you
stricter
expect
requirement.
us to sign the document?
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
I'm working on Talking About WESN, the content capital, and joining me, of course, we expected to have a follow-up conversation because some things changed between Monday and now, but then ironically, when we scheduled this discussion, something changed between then and now as well, and I'm talking about what's happening with the succession planning. And of course, to have that conversation, I am speaking about my co-host, Mr. Keaton Shaw. Good morning, Keaton.
Good morning, Sean. How are you doing? Happy Thursday.
I tried to spend some time before you came on to reiterate my point so I don't go on and on. The long and short is, I am actually bewildered. I am bewildered at the low-level tactics of what just happened and the fact that people are saying, well, I didn't realize what I was voting for at the time, so I now want to wait and see. And I'm just like, this is government business? This is how we conduct things at the highest level? I don't understand.
Honestly, I'm quite pleased because to an extent it shows that there are still some principles involved in respect to the process of internal party politics. And that is what we're seeing based off of the reporting coming from the People's National Movement. Now, I must make it clear that we must not underestimate the People's National Movement when it comes to dealing with these internal issues. As I stressed previously, they always seem to be better at sorting out their internal issues, especially when it's highlighted in a public space. So this is just perhaps a hole in the road. This can easily be sorted out. But to the entire point of Stuart Young succeeding Dr. Keith Rowley as Prime Minister upon his resignation, whenever that may be, following our conversation on Monday morning, wasn't it quite surprising that Monday afternoon the Prime Minister spoke to the media and announced Stuart Young. I thought that was quite brilliant given our conversations earlier in the day.
Yes.
But what is quite baffling to me is at this point, you've got a conflict between the People's National Movement's constitution and the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And I say that in the sense that the Constitution allows for the president, and I'm sure this point has been repeated, the Constitution allows for the president to appoint an individual whom they think will command the majority. Now, Stuart Young, 11-9. Obviously, that's the majority, but it's not the overwhelming majority.
Wait,
noting that the Prime Minister...
It's not the majority in the House. Technically, you have to also include the opposition. The assumption is that the entire majority government slate will vote in one direction.
We're not speaking about a special majority. We're speaking about majority on the side of cabinet. And that is what I'm saying. He has the majority of sitting MPs that make up cabinet. He does not have an overwhelming majority, which is question marks in itself. Now, this can be linked to a couple of things. Is there a lack of confidence in the way this entire process was handled? Is there a lack of confidence in Dr. Keith Rowley and how he has handled this situation? Is there there seems to be an unfavorable stance by some MPs in relation to that. Is there a lack of confidence in Stuart Young's ability to lead the People's National Movement? Has he been forced upon MPs given the actions of the current Prime Minister over the couple of years? But honestly, it's rather confusing. At this point, the Constitution for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago allows for this to happen, yet the People's National Movement seems to hit a snag in the road. If a vote took place, you then expect MPs who voted against Stuart Young to sign a letter in favor of his appointment? That, well, I can't see how that could be deemed as acceptable.
No, well, Keaton, this is what I believe happened. Because the point is, with regards to selecting the Prime Minister, you would need all of the government MPs to technically tell the President, we support X. He commands us because we are the majority. If it's 11-9, then technically there are more people who will support, right? Like if this gets to Parliament, if the 11-9 split is maintained in Parliament, then potentially, I don't think this has ever happened before, so I don't even know how the law could potentially address it or not, but potentially Kamala Persad-Bissessar will have a majority support when compared to Stuart Young and presumably the other potential candidates in the PNM, Penelope Beckles, right? Essentially, you might not be able to consider the PNM as one party if the split goes all the way to that point. It is like two entities, two sides within one party. I don't know to what extent, I can't remember if the Constitution specifically uses the term political leader or if what you just said there is the actual literal words, who commands the majority of Parliament. Because you could have a three-way split in Parliament and then the majority is not 11, the majority I believe would be 18.
Well, this is why the letter is trying to be signed to hand over to the President. But again, there is a confusion over the roles of political leader and Prime Minister, and it was brilliantly explained on Monday by Mariano Brown, who indicated that the Constitution of the People's National Movement dictates that the political leader should be the Prime Minister. Now, Ansel Dennis has also indicated that there's no need for the General Council to ratify the decision of Stuart Young to be the next Prime Minister. And he's absolutely right. That is dictated by the Constitution. But it's the People's National Movement's Constitution that is really conflicting everything that is happening. Now, a couple things to add to this. One, it is, in my opinion, based off of the events and how it was unfolded, that the Prime Minister actually has, to a great extent, circumvented the powers and even the authority of the President. Because it's the President that should be appointing the Prime Minister. To have this vote, there's no issue with a party taking a vote. But where the Prime Minister circumvented the powers of the President is the manner in which he announced it. He said, it has been decided that Stuart Young, using those words, it has been decided it's not up to the Prime Minister or necessarily the party. It is up to the President. Now, again, nothing is wrong with a vote taking place, but the simple aspect as per how it was announced and the words that were chosen does suggest that the powers of the President have been circumvented. Now, to ratify that point, that it would be Stuart Young who will have the majority, there seems to be a letter that is circulating for the signatories, the signatures of the MPs to be placed upon it in order to give the affirmation that, yes, we are supporting Stuart Young. But those who voted against Stuart Young, do you really expect for them to sign this letter? Now, again, don't underestimate the possibility of this being sorted out. But the Prime Minister, certainly in my opinion, I've gotten the impression he's already circumvented the powers of the President in that decision-making process. Added to all of this, 11-9, the Prime Minister abstained from voting according to reports, but 11-9 suggests that the individuals who split the vote in favor of Stuart Young would have been Stuart Young himself, obviously. He would have voted for himself. I don't think he would have voted against himself. And who's the one other individual? Well, anybody could take a guess. I've heard some names and some courses, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to call them this morning. So all this is happening, and the confusion is between the PNM's constitution. And if you take a look at the timeline, the Prime Minister has indicated he'll attend this meeting, his last meeting as Prime Minister. I almost made some confusion. As Prime Minister next month, CARICOM meeting.
Yeah.
Following which he will resign, and we're looking at something probably like March, maybe at the end of the state of emergency, and it'll be up to Stuart Young to call the election date. Parliament is due to go into recess in June. In August, I think by August 20th or 27th, Parliament is due to be dissolved, and you have 90 days following that for a general election to be held. But the convention, the PNM convention, is due to take place at the end of September, which then a political leader would be decided. But then you've got budget in October. So if you take a look at the timeline, I think it suggests you're going to have an earlier election. I think it suggests we're going to have an earlier election. I suspect, and I'm making a prediction, I don't usually like to, but I think after the 3-month state of emergency, the government is not going to risk another 3 months of a state of emergency. It's due to be debated on Monday. Following the state of emergency, I think, and when carnival activities have passed, I think you're going to see the election being called. This is where the conflict again lies. You're waiting until September to have the PNM convention to elect a political leader. Does that mean that Dr. Keith Rowley will be still taking part of screening processes? If they haven't been completed by the time he resigns, is he still going to be taking part in this screening process as well for candidates as political leader? Are you going to have a political leader who's not Prime Minister and Prime Minister who's not political leader? It's all confusing. But there is one aspect of this. And I ask you the question, Sean. What was Dr. Keith Rowley's legacy prior to this? What was his legacy prior to his announcement last week, Friday?
I think what he wanted it to be was the airport was Sandals. Sandals did not go through. They want to put another hotel in that spot. There's the airport. I think what it will be is COVID, which is a mixed bag because some part of it was good, but the enforcement of public health regulations and to some extent the hypocrisy of the public health regulations enforcement, or rather how it was trampled on by either politicians or others, right, as well as the hypocrisy of the border lockdown, I think will kind of tarnish that legacy. Overall, it was a reasonable one, all things considered, but then you have to wonder, to some extent, was that more due to the efforts of the Minister of Health and the Ministry of Health as opposed to Cabinet itself, because Cabinet's other functions, like actually dealing with public health regulations and the border, that's where you have the wider issues with. That's where we got all the COVID from, even after Carnival.
Sean, before we get caught up in that conversation, and thank you for answering my question, the Prime Minister, the airport is due to be open, I think, in March, if I'm not mistaken, either March or May. But yes, the airport will always stand there and be remembered because of the controversy or the magnitude associated with the airport, whatever the case may be. Of course, will be associated with the People's National Movement government and Dr. Keith Rowley. However, again, in my opinion, and I ask that question because to me, Dr. Rowley has created his own legacy by being the first prime minister in office to resign.
True.
And he's also created a legacy within the People's National Movement by not only falling out with a political leader, that is Patrick Manning, but then also becoming political leader after that major fallout. When everybody was supporting Patrick Manning and Keith Rowley became a backbencher, he created his own legacy within the party by then making that comeback to become political leader and then prime minister. He's now created his own national legacy by being the first sitting prime minister to resign whilst in office. And also, with all this confusion that is taking place, he's created a legacy there. And I think that is what he's going to be remembered for. So he has created his own legacy. There were question marks exactly as to what was going to be his legacy before. I think we have a better understanding of that now.
That's a good point.
But again, I am wondering, how is this going to be sorted out?
Well,
in the sense that Stuart Young may have been in favor, may have been seen as the favorable one by the Prime Minister and quite possibly by the finances of the party. But the finances of the party do not necessarily equate to an automatic election win. If Stuart Young does not have the support of the base of the party, then you are going to see trouble. And I think that is already brewing. Again, don't underestimate the ability of the PNM to sort it out in a quick manner and for their public relations machine to try and flip a switch. But you already see that happening, and this is where the point of the General Council and the Constitution of the PNM coming into play is. I'm definitely of the opinion that you cannot wait until September to have elections for political leader. If you want Stuart Young to take over as Prime Minister, once you resign, he needs to have a commanding majority, of which he clearly does not have, following which, into a general election, you should have political leadership internal elections as well. That should be decided before general election. This has led the party into a bit of a topsy-turvy state. The Prime Minister's handled this from the top down, and though I admire him for making such a magnanimous decision, it's quite an astounding decision, I still am of the opinion that he is doing a bit more harm than good at this point. It needs to be sorted out and clarity needs to be given. It's very unfortunate what is happening.
I actually think my opinion on the matter has been reduced given this news, because I was willing to assume, I thought it would have been a reasonable assumption, because I called it a very cheap tactic, a very basic trick. Let's not talk about the political leadership. Let's just make the conversation that the caucus held solely about making a decision about the Prime Minister because Dr. Rowley is resigning soon. And how do you leave that whole other important factor kind of up in the air, undecided? The fact that MPs are reported to basically saying they did not realize that Dr. Rowley would maintain his position as political leader. Because, Keaton, I thought it was reasonable that, ultimately speaking, if the MPs, which include the General Secretary and the Chairman, Stuart Young is the Chairman, how convenient, and just by the way, this is one of the reasons why I don't think members of Cabinet should also be the party executives. But no one took me on when I said that earlier. And now the person who is potentially being tried to force through, he's the party chairman. How convenient that is for him. I wonder why he was made the chairman. Anyway, I thought that the MP supported...
He wasn't made chairman, he was elected chairman.
He was made chairman. On a practical level, I think it's reasonable to state that I believe that he was made chairman, right?
Then you're undermining the democratic process of the internal party elections.
I didn't do it.
I beg your pardon?
I didn't do it. I didn't put him there. So
it doesn't matter. Even making those statements are irresponsible. But anyway, continue.
But look at the situation that the party finds itself in now. I think it's reasonable. There's a potential internal constitutional crisis of the party. Because when now you have the general, well, I don't know if the general secretary is included in 9, but you have 9 MPs basically not wanting to sign in. It could be the 9 MPs that support the Penelope Beckles. Look, I thought that this was Dr. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and political leader of PNM, setting things up to do things the right way. I did not expect him to hold on to the post of political leader, potentially have the general elections, and then the party wants to try and figure out who's going to be the political leader and Prime Minister after the fact. I think that to some extent is borderline, if not outright unethical. And then on top of that, I do think that this situation, like I said, it was rushed through. It was rushed through because why do you have to come back to the fact to try and get signatures in order to somewhat, cement the position of the people involved? All of the criticisms after the announcement was made that Stuart Young will replace Dr. Trolley as Prime Minister, when that announcement was made, and you're right, it does bypass the president, at least to some degree, it did not include the discussion of the political leadership. Other people brought that into the discussion. At the time, I was thinking that's not appropriate. But now, given what has come out, I have to retract my statement and say in hindsight, and maybe they didn't necessarily know for sure, maybe they did know for sure, they have been proven right. Because I understand what you're saying, that don't underestimate the machinery of the PNM. But the problem is there seems to be a fundamental split, not just in the opinion of who's going to replace Dr. Trolley in the interim, but who's going to replace him overall, so much so that it has come out in the public, and I don't know if the machinery can compensate enough for this, because let's not forget, this Prime Minister, essentially, his legacy of how he was a backbencher to how he became political leader, and all of the things that happened in between, has set a precedent that kind of, to some extent, undermines the process that kept the PNM strong for all those years before. A process of aggressive politicking, because they, apparently it's reported, they promised people high government positions for their vote. And that's one of the reasons why Stuart Young, imagine without those promises, that potentially means that out of not even 11 people think he might have been the best candidate for the job. Because it took political promises to get there.
Problem. Sorry to interject. It must be stated that those are only reports that are alleging such actions took place.
Yes,
I think that
allegedly.
needs to be stated. Go on, Sean, continue.
No. So, I mean, the fact that this situation here now, I thought that the Prime Minister did enough to settle a lot of these questions, and they're not settled. And I can't get over the fact that essentially, and it makes me wonder again, Keaton, is this, because to some extent, this is kind of what they do. They don't tell us the full story. They leave out important details at times that leaves us asking a lot of questions about what's going on with X, Y, and Z. And it makes me wonder the level of professionalism. And is this widespread in the government, in politics story, not just in the PNM, the level of professionalism and how to do your job? I can't look at this and see, oh yes, this is how things are supposed to be done. I can't. I don't want to necessarily go with disparaging remarks, but they would come off the tongue very easy, and I'm holding back on criticizing with stronger language. And I'm not meaning curse words, but I'm just meaning this is not right in the sense of no one could I don't think it's reasonable to try to make a case. Yeah, there's nothing to see here. If the MP supported Dr. Trolley to maintain the position of political leader, and if they were going to choose a new political leader before the next general election, I would have been okay with it, because that's within the bounds of the law. But now it seems as though, listen, we are potentially heading towards a national constitutional crisis, not just a PNM constitutional crisis, which apparently is shaping up to be right now.
I can't see how we're heading to a national constitutional crisis. I can't see that actually taking place. As I said, I think the Prime Minister, to a certain degree, has circumvented the decision-making powers of the President in how this was announced or how this has been handled.
Isn't that part of the Constitution?
Right? No, whilst I understand the point that you're making, I don't necessarily think it's going to lead to a constitutional crisis, because now the President has been put into a position, and we all would be of the opinion that she would listen to the directives given by the Prime Minister, the sitting Prime Minister. However, she still has, she should still have an independent mind, and she should still be very much independent in her decision-making process. Whether or not she chooses for that to be the case, we will see. Only time will tell. But what is interesting as well is that at this point, these MPs who voted against Stuart Young, who would have been seen as the favored candidate by the Prime Minister, and those who are allegedly refusing, whomever the case may be, because we don't know names, to sign this document, They're simply saying, we don't have to account to Dr. Rowley anymore. We don't have to be fearful of our position in the party. We don't have to wonder whether or not we will still be in favor if an election is called for our seats as candidates. They are stating that. So it shows perhaps that since the decision, or even before his decision was publicly made, that he was probably losing the support and confidence of party members. And at this point, again, it shows we don't have to, we can stand up and we can be affirmed in our position. We don't necessarily have to be fearful of any retaliation on the part of Dr. Rowley anymore.
Yeah.
Though he is political leader, still, that is an issue that should be sorted out internally. Again, it's a national party, and I recognize that it is a national party, but it's an internal mess that needs to be sorted out internally. What it has done, though, it's caused a great distraction from the issues of a state of emergency. It's caused a great distraction from other burning topics and from other burning issues. It's dominated news. You know, and it really, you never know. This could be a strategy on the part of Dr. Rowley, and by extension the PNM. Again, it is quite a possibility. Don't underestimate that this may all be planned, or this may all be part of the process. You never can tell. You never know. You make assumptions based off of history, but it has caused a great sense of distraction. But on the basis of it, if these allegations or if what is being reported is true, I say it's a good thing, because it shows that there are still some principles involved internally when it comes to this election process, and the role of political leader of the People's National Movement should be sorted out before a general election is called. If you have Stuart Young being the Prime Minister, that is one thing that the Constitution provides for, but the role of political leader needs to be sorted out, and it should be determined whether or not Stuart Young gains the favor of the majority of those in party as political leader, and whether or not he or somebody else will be leading the PNM in a general election. That needs to be determined. But until such happens, we are left with this mess. We are left with this confusion. And of course, it's also unfair, need I say, that the supporters of the People's National Movement will not have a choice. If internal elections aren't called, General Council doesn't meet. It is unfair that they will not have a say in whom they believe is best suited or best fit to lead the PNM in the next general election.
The thing is, Keaton, if this is a distraction, it's trying to distract us from bad news with worse news. If this is a distraction, I hope it's not so, because the implications to the PNM, I think, are potentially disastrous. Here's why I say it's potentially leading us to a constitutional crisis. And I said it before. As long as there's no replacement candidate that can enjoy the universal support by all of the government MPs once Dr. Keith Rowley steps down, this cannot go forward. Because if the 11-9 split is maintained in Parliament, then if Dr. Keith Rowley resigns, we are in a no man's land that even the 18-18 tie will not necessarily help inform the president on what to do in this situation, because it will technically be 18-11-9, right? It all depends on what's going on internally and how far the 9 want to push it. Because the assumption would be they're not going to allow the Kamala Prasad to become prime minister for the next however many months, right? Even though to some extent it's not really that important, but it will, the optics of it will look even worse. So granted, I don't expect it to get to that point, but the 9 people who don't want to support Stuart Young, given the whole uncertainty of how the transition is going to take place, because that's the implication, Keaton. Even MPs in this situation don't really know what the Prime Minister intends to do. So they're saying, let's just wait and for further discussion. Let's not rush to a decision. Why are you rushing us for? Right? And if they don't support whatever he wants to try to rush through, then he can't resign in March, because there's way too much question marks. And I think you're right. At the end of the day, the political leadership needs to be decided before the election. that is the part that I will agree with regards to Jennifer Batiste-Primus, Robert LaHunt, and all of the others. At that point, because that was the question, that was what was not said. That's how politicians like to operate in TNT. It's what they don't say that's important. They didn't talk about the
question was
leadership.
asked, and the Prime Minister did state that the party convention is due to be held in September, and I think he did call it that date, the 20th, if I'm not mistaken.
No, but Keaton,
so we know that. But he did answer that question.
No, but Keaton, that question had to include when the general election will be with regards to that, and exactly what his status as political leader would be. There could have been an interim political leader, right? All of those things were up in the air, right? So I understand that he said when the convention will be for the next to be chosen, but that by and of itself does not answer all the questions of the pertinent situation of what's going to happen with the political leadership moving forward into the next general election.
So the two other points I'd like to make in relation to this. I think what Gary Griffith has said in respect to it being an ideal opportunity for opposition parties leading up to a general election, I think he's absolutely correct. Stuart Young comes with quite a bit of baggage, and you know, I know people can respond and say, well, tell me a politician who does not. But because of his promotion over the last 2-3 years, however you like to say, he does come with a lot of baggage and a lot of controversy. But I despise the nasty politics that is being practiced. And the one thing that I would agree with the Prime Minister on is when he said he sees the level of decay when it comes to our politics. He made that comment on Monday as well. However, don't be fooled, Mr. Prime Minister. You have contributed. You are a major contributing factor to that decay in our politics. And I will not apologize for that. You are very much partly responsible for that decline in our level of politics. But as it relates to what is happening now in the response to Stuart Young, especially from what I'm seeing coming out of the United National Congress, it is quite poor and unfortunate. You know, you want to raise issues, raise points. But it is not, this level of nasty politics is what I want to see a change of. I want to see different. Raise your points, make them, you know, and be firm in your position. But don't go and practice this nasty style of politics. I am totally against that. I am not in favor of that at all. The second point that I wanted to make is, so we've had a conversation before about a non-Afro Trinidadian leading the People's National Movement and a non-Indo-Trinidadian leading the United National Congress. I think if this goes ahead, as it currently stands, if this progresses, this is a good litmus test to see whether or not we are moving away from racial voting. This is a very good litmus test to see if we are moving away from that and how society is responding. I think that if it progresses, that is one positive coming out of all of this that we can look forward to. And that's just a minor positive, but it is still something significant. If we are moving away from racial lines, if we are breaking away from that sort of politics, it would be interesting to see. It would be. I think it's a good litmus test.
Here's the problem, the catch-22 with that, Keaton. If we are force-fed Stuart Young and he succeeds, there will be major questions about the democratic process, because the internal politics of a country impacts the national democratic process, at least to some measure. But more importantly, if he is force-fed to the country and force-fed to the PNM, and they fail, this will set that back probably by decades. We may potentially not see a non-Afro-Trinbagonian leading the PNM or a non-Indo-Trinbagonian leading the UNC for decades again. Whatever advances we made as a society to kind of go beyond racial politics may be set back, and I don't necessarily want to see that. I don't share your enthusiasm with the silver lining. I do share in the fact that, yes, I agree with you, the Prime Minister, Dr. Heath Rowley, he has been a major contributor with the state of politics now. I have made the comparison between what's going on now and some of the things that are happening now and what happened when he became a backbencher and then ultimately became political leader of the PNM. Down to drawing the comparisons with complaints over certain contracts being awarded in less than transparent means or potentially questionable means. And ultimately, how will certain personalities that eventually sided with him at the end, what are they going to do right now? We've heard Dr. Brown, and I've heard behind the scenes of those names being mentioned with regards to when they supported Mr. Manning and when they supported Dr. Keith Rowley. And their support, listen, if they were willing to move on from Mr. Manning so quickly, not to say that Mr. Manning was perfect. He had flaws which we have brought up on Talking Point, like how he treated with community leaders, like how he treated with unilateral decision making. But if their loyalty, if it was so easy for their loyalty to switch to Dr. Keith Rowley, why? I mean, I understand. I assume he's not a babe in the woods, doe-eyed, innocent baby, you know, with regards to politics. Their loyalty to him is totally and completely based on him being political leader and prime minister of the country. And the minute he moves on, it's going to end. And you live by aggressively pursuing your ambition, you're going to fall, essentially, or what you built is going to fall because it's not based on a foundation of consensus building and leadership and trust and unity. It was based on politicking and backroom deals and who supports who and cliques. And now the chickens have potentially come home to roost. Now, I did not think that it would have been impossible for him to figure it out and prevent any sort of controversy from happening, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And I hate to think the fact that the whole racial political argument might get sucked into this in a negative way, Keaton. I could be wrong, you could be right, and it might be a positive. It might desensitize us more, but I'm not sure if I agree with that, because unfortunately the backlash is going to be in part because of his race. That is his situation.
The other question I'd like to ask, and it's a bit more of a controversial question, and it's a possibility I may face backlash for it, but I think it's something that we should speak about and not necessarily be afraid to address, and that is, how does the population respond to a woman in power, a woman leader? You know, I know that we have these conversations about breaking the glass ceiling and you know, woman empowerment and woman leadership, and these are conversations we need to have. But how does the population as a whole respond to that? You know, Kamla Prasad-Bisesa was prime minister between 2010 and 2015. When the elections were held in 2015, the campaign was Vote Kamla. It was a complete failure.
Yes.
He's been political leader of the United National Congress since. And I can't say that they've made inroads. They will campaign and say that we've made inroads, we've done this, we've done that. And the one aspect in which she has won is her response saying that I'm the only political leader that has been elected. That's quite, it's funny, but it's very much true. She is the only political leader that has been elected. Mind you, she has somebody in Philip Edward Alexander who has just dictated his party. He hasn't been elected either under her helm now,
yes.
but I'm saying she's won in that aspect. Apart from that, you also had the former president, and whether or not there seems to be people see unfavorable at this point, given what happened between 2010 and 2015 and the Vote Kamla campaign, and then the former president as well, Paula May Weeks, whether or not they actually see some sort of a disenchantment with that aspect as well. You know, so is that something that could also be a factor in this entire process, in the instance of Penelope Beckles going up for political leadership, or all other things that we should consider and have conversations about? But as I said, this is going to continue for some time. You know, Dr. Keith Rowley is still Prime Minister, and he's still political leader, and this needs to be sorted out. But there are other important issues and other important topics that are affecting Trinidad and Tobago.
Well,
and unfortunately, this conversation, because of its dominance, has distracted us from such. And hopefully we'll get into those conversations maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But, you know, at this point, Sean, it's a wait-and-see game.
I'll say this. I'm not too sure how Kamala Prasad-Bisesa, as the first female prime minister, what effect that had on women in power in the country. I do suspect, though, that we've had far too many considerations of let's just get the first woman as opposed to let's just get great candidates, right? And other high officers have damaged that situation. And I don't necessarily want to put names out there because people will say I'm a hater. But there's one very glaring example, and I think people could guess who it is, but I don't want to debate it, right? Now, with that said, Penelope Beckles has less baggage. I don't know if she'll be a great candidate. I don't know if she'll make a great prime minister, but I do think she would make a reasonable candidate for prime minister. And like Kamala Pasabi-Sessa, I have no problem waiting to see how she performs, right? To some extent, you can't judge her performance always before the fact. That's just assumption. Then we have to wait and see if she gets a chance, what she would actually do. There's a part of me that is curious. She's been in politics so long. There's a part of me that actually would like to see what she might do. I may be disappointed. I may be content. I have no idea, right? But I'll say this, and I'll end with the conversation with this, Keaton. I find it's crazy that we potentially, once Dr. Crowley steps down from political leader, however that works out, right? That we would have one political leader potentially out of all of the political parties that was chosen by its members. Just one. Think about that. We have this big election coming up and all these people going forward for elections and want to campaign, and basically one political leader will actually be chosen by their party to lead them. What does that say about us and the whole democratic process? Because, yeah, we could have voted, but we could have voted for people who weren't actually selected. They basically, in various means, kind of got themselves there. And I don't know if I like that. I don't think, when you look at it that way, at that statistic, Keaton, that you pointed out, I think it kind of makes our whole democratic, it undermines, to some extent, our whole democratic process.
I just want to point out very quickly before we go, and I don't say this very often, but kudos to Watson Duke. He found a very brilliant way to share some advice with the Prime Minister. And Watson Duke indicated, let me just get it.
Yeah, read it, because I read some of it, but I'm not sure where you're going.
Yeah, he said he wanted Dr. Rowley to learn from his past mistakes after naming a successor. Handing over power doesn't always go as planned. And I think whether or not, how you look at it, I think it's just brilliant how he has responded to this. I give kudos to him.
It is brilliant, but that was more of a him problem than an anyone else problem, in my opinion.
It's a him problem, I understand that, but generally, I think it's quite smart on his part. And how often can we say that?
I mean, it'll be interesting. I'm actually very curious to see how long his political career in elected office lasts. You know, because there's a THA election come up, I believe, next year, is it? So that'll be. I'm not advocating for him not being voted back in. I'm just literally just curious as to how people will respond to him. With that said, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines. We had a long discussion on this, folks. But the 180 of my opinion on the situation, I was shocked. I didn't expect it to be so simply underwhelming with regards to how this played out. Let's take a break. When we come back, you could weigh in and ask Keaton and me questions if you have. Stay tuned.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com, for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today. Simons Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simons, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
And we're back here on Talking About the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Smith joined by Mr. Keaton Shaw from AM Prime, host of Talking Point. Let's not forget that his name is still in credits. Now is the time we open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. You could call in and have your say. Of course, the topic that's dominating the headlines, front page news this morning, Stuart Young kind of stuck in limbo because the caucus that the government MPs had, the vote, 11-9, it seems as though some people didn't necessarily know what they were voting for. Now, of course, this is what's been reported to us. We don't necessarily know all of the details that happened. But I think to some extent, we may not know what exactly has gone on. But something has gone on. Now, you could call in and have your say. What do you think is that going on? Or, if we want to assume, for the sake of argument, that the reports are true, what is your take on it? The phone number should be up on your screen. Please, if you call in, remember to mute your television. Don't try to talk to us through the television screen or through the television audio. Keaton, this is, I wonder to what extent this is going to turn off the voting population further. Between what's going on with the PNM and then the UNC saying, we don't need a facelift. We're fine just the way we are. Like, I suspect, because Karen, I think Karen or somebody else believes that the voter turnout will be very low. And I suspect it might be like that, and I'm afraid if that happens.
Of course the voter turnout is going to be low. I don't have a lot of confidence in people coming out to vote because of the frustrations, and probably because a lot of people are leaving Trinidad and Tobago. So they just are not going to vote. That's an aspect of it as well. Honestly speaking, Sean, it is a bit of a turnout. And the UNC, the UNC needs a facelift. I mean, should they be unsuccessful in the general election, what does that mean? I guess we'll only answer that question when that point comes. But if history tells us anything, Kamala Sessa may remain as opposition leader for another 5 years. That is if they are unsuccessful. I mean, and that's just piece of history. But they certainly need a facelift. Put it this way. Sorry, before you make your point, if they were to announce a general election on Monday, the date on Monday, following the debate of the CDM, which say if they were to announce a date, is the UNC ready for a snap general election? Are they in a position right now to say we are ready, we are prepared for a snap general election?
I think neither party would be in Parliament. I think neither party would be. We have two callers tonight. San Fernando first. Good morning, caller. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean. Morning, Keaton.
Morning.
Good morning.
Sean, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you would like that. Are you a member of the PNM?
Technically, yes.
Okay. But technically, either yes or no?
In the past, I was. So they would have the record there. I have
You're not a member,
membership. I had.
Right. So you are not a member.
You're not a member.
Well, it was not. Well, it was before COVID, so I don't know.
You are not a member.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Okay, so because I listened to your discourse and your passion in your discourse, and I wanted to know where this was coming from. Keaton has a more measured and level-headed, non-aligned type of discourse. But let me say this about this situation with the PNM. And I cares, really cares. Let me say this. Dr. Rowley has decided to go. And we are looking on. In my opinion, if I had to vote for somebody a new leader in the PNM for the upcoming general election, and you look at who is there, practically Stuart Young is the best person there. Whether or not you talk about the demographics and racial voting and those things at the PNM, Stuart Young is the best candidate. However, Stuart Young may not be the best candidate for political leader. So why is there not a possibility where you have a candidate who would be candidate for prime minister but not the political leader? I think this is where mature politics should take place in the PNM, because I don't see anybody who wants to be political leader apart from let me put it this way: the person who wants to be the candidates for political leader I see inside there are not good enough to be prime minister. I'm serious about that. Stuart Young is the best candidate, in my opinion, to lead the country as a prime minister. However, he may not be.
Can I ask to clarify? Is it that he's a good candidate, or is it that the other candidates are so bad he is, in your opinion, the best of the lot, head and shoulders, because they are not good enough?
I don't. Good question, Sean. I don't. How do I put it, boy? I don't see them as being good enough. So I'll put it on here. I don't see them as being good enough. Ms. Beckers, who has been there very, very long, who had contested the position of political leader at one time. Ms. Beckers, you know, she has stayed out of trouble. She hasn't been in no controversy. You know, sometimes you have a position, you take a position and you've been too safe.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Beckers is one of those that has been too safe. And quite frankly, I don't want somebody there who is too safe to run a country. She could be in the internal party thing. She could probably be the political leader of the party, but not as a prime minister. And I think the time has come for them to consider that you have the two roles separate. The political leadership of the party may not be the best to be the person to run the party, may not be the best person for the prime ministership, and that is where I see mature politics going in this country if they are serious. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you, caller. We have another caller waiting.
Thank you, caller, for your contribution.
Sorry, Chamflares? Chamflares, good morning, caller. You're on the air. Hopefully still with us. Chamflares?
Chamflair.
Chamflair, sorry. Oh
Yes.
gosh, I'm like.
Yes.
Morning. I'm like a minister.
Yes. Good morning, sir. I'm pleased here. And the line is long, so I think we have.
I think the call cut out.
That is quite unfortunate. Caller, please restart your point. Unfortunately, we lost you for a bit.
All right, okay, let me restart. The question I have to ask is does anyone know why the convention, the PNM convention, was not held last year?
A substantive reason has not, up until this point, in my opinion, has not been given. So to answer your question, no, there isn't a justifiable reason.
So I believe that the General Council was outfoxed because Prime Minister Rowley waited until the break of the new year to announce that how they are going about to select a replacement for him. Only this new year, in the year of the election, there can be no party convention. Party convention is not held in the election year.
Is that it?
That scenario and outfox that General Council are now waking up to realize what Mr. By brand new year. He didn't even wait for the ink of the 2025 to dry, and he said convention this year for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you that in relation to this, when the General Secretary was asked questions, the Chairman, Stuart Young, Foster Cummings was asked, everybody said refer to the Prime Minister. And so, caller, you probably have are linking it and making a fair link, but internally we don't have a justifiable reason. But I see that from an independent point of view. Internally, we don't know what the membership thinks. But thank you very much for your contribution, caller. Apologies for the wait. As you said, the lines are long. We have a call on the line with us from Shagonas. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Professor.
I hope you don't mind if I don't take your topic, because I think it's a waste of time. Because no matter who they pick,
probably quite right.
no matter who they pick, none of them will address the problems of the country. And if you look at today, people, you talk about 60,000 families spotted in Trinidad. And if you read it, it appears to be state land. And you hear all kinds.
I think roughly half of them are applying for certificates of comfort.
And what happened to it? They haven't said what happened to it, because the letter of comfort is easy to deal with. You have a law saying who can be regularized for whatever purpose, and all you have to do is apply it. And nobody is saying what happened. They say they have very little punishment for people who make it. It's not punishment, it's enforcement of the law. Right? They talk about tenancy policy for squatters. That is a dangerous thing. What you should really do is enforce the laws. There's a town and country planning law, and if they don't have permission to build the building, don't allow it. Right? There's also a property tax law in Trinidad that all properties which is not occupied, owned and occupied by the state or exempt authorities like churches and things like that, is supposed to pay property tax. Why don't they do that? Right? You talk about these letters of comfort, and nobody is saying why it is that they do that. They talk about every year next 400 or 500 squatters coming up. What are they doing about that? Because if you, one at a time, you don't need no legislation to deal with squatters. Is when they are in the process of squatting. You could use what they call self-help. Right? And the cause of all this is the Land Settlement Agency saying they want powers, but that is nonsense. The powers in the colonial days was under the Commissioner of Crown Land, because those days the Queen was in charge, or King, or whatever it was. And when we get independence, it's the Commissioner of State Land. And that is where the power should lie, with the Commissioner of State. And he is the one to be enforced, no Land Settlement Agency. Any questions, gentlemen, or comments?
No problem.
Queries? Okay,
You know, caller,
you.
you've raised a very good point.
Yeah.
So much so it's triggering me right now, just to clarify exactly who's the Commissioner of State Lands. You know, so thank you very
Thank
much
you,
actually
caller.
for your contribution on what I think also is a very important topic.
I'll just say this. Because of the number of squatters involved and the fact that the problem has allowed to have grown so large, I think there's a lack of political will to deal with it properly, because dealing with it properly might end up with some very unpopular decisions and policies. But the fact of the matter is, it should have never been allowed to reach this point. But again, that's what we do. We allow open wounds to fester until we have to cut off the leg. We you know, until the solution becomes very unpalatable. Sorry. Meanwhile, let's just respond to Mr. San Fernando. I'm not sure if it's practical to separate the role of political leader and prime minister, because I think in the States there's no political leader role per se, but the presidential candidate is the leader of the party, I believe. On some practical level, you know, he has to be. The leader in government has to have a major leadership role in the party. And there's a party chairman for a reason, but if the party chairman is also in cabinet, well then the rest of the executive should be separate from the government for this reason. The party chairman of the DNC and the RNC, I don't think, have roles in elected positions in government. I could be wrong about that. We have Move on the line. Keaton, you could respond to what I just said after. Good morning, caller, on the air.
Good morning, gentlemen. Well,
Good morning, caller.
And Keaton, I have to really agree so much with the professor. I don't know him, but I wish I could have met with this guy and sit down, even with Mr. San Fernando.
I really wish I could sit down and have discussion with these guys. Because, as the professor said, why I'm going to get in this conversation about the PNM internal and the PNM, no matter who is put in charge of the PNM today, last week, next year, nothing is going to change. This party has been in office for 50 years. What has changed? The professor said it is about law enforcement. The PNM has a history of poor law enforcement. This is the heart, this is the soul of why Trinidad and Tobago is so lawless. We have been bred and buttered from the inception. Laws not being enforced. This is why squatting is a problem. This is why the PH is there. This is why our driving habits. You know, every time I hear the transport commissioner boast about the U-turn and talk about things, I wonder about these people. I say, but do these people drive on our roadways and see what happens? The average driver, what the average driver does, do they pass and stand up and look at what goes on in Mobile Junction or in the Quasi, or, you know, these people just talk sit down in their office and just mouth and talk a lot of nonsense, and the media likes that, and they are giving prominence here and there. But at the end of the day, the soul of Trinidad and Tobago continues to die because we are a country being run without law enforcement. I keep saying that you can't run a country without law enforcement, you know, and then we having this debate and talking about the party and who's best to put. What difference is it going to make? It's not going to make any difference. Stuart Young is not manna from heaven. He's not going to change anything. And then we keep forgetting that this man, this prime minister we have, his whole, look at what happened from the time he attained power to now. Keith Rowley has done every single thing that he wants to do for him. Can anybody put me to sit down and tell me exactly what has this government, what has this prime minister done for the average person over the last 10 years? And you know something, Sean? The final rank of the PNM support, they don't care. They will, no matter who is put there, Eric Williams said it. He said, if I put a crap over her, send a crap over her body, you will vote for him. And the crowd said, yes. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. What? This, and I want to remind this prime minister in the waiting that he promised this girl who was killed, Miss Barrett, he promised her father that he would deal with the PH in a big way, with grandstand, you know, everything, all the sentiment, all the pain and the hurt for the girl's father there, and in the midst of all that, Stuart Young promised, I will deal with the PH system. Has anything changed? So when we having all these discussions, we're just wasting time, Sean, and as I told you before, Sean, you are too young to know the PNM is a cult. When the boss of the PNM says this is what is going to be done, everyone falls into place, from the membership to the supporters. Nobody is going to change anything. That is how it is. And Trinidad is suffering. That is the problem. Over and out.
Well, there's a flaw in your logic, but before I get into it, Keaton, I'll let you respond. I think we should close off the phone lines now. But Keaton, I don't know if you have anything you want to say?
All I will say in response to the caller from MOVA is, I agree with you. If we sat down and had conversations with many of our callers, it will go on for hours and hours. I think for the regulars in particular, San Fernando, even from this gentleman from St. James who calls in, from to Professor Chigones, I would love to meet these gentlemen and sit down and have conversations for hours, because I think there's a lot that they can teach us as they have on previous occasions. But also I think the opinions are quite healthy and the debates itself will be quite healthy. I don't think I want to play all fours with them though, because it might be a very heated game given the strategies of all sides. But it's we are very fortunate that we have some very good contributors.
All right, Mr. Mover, there's one unfortunate flaw in your logic, and that is the fact that you're saying, why are we bothered with the leadership with regards to what you describe as the cult of the PNM? Well, here's the problem. We need more involvement in the political process, not less. The fact of the matter is, essentially, by not having the discussion, by not taking it on, by not wanting to participate, If we go by your definition that the PNM is a cult, we are leaving the fate of the country to be determined by the members of said organization, right? Because the UNC, at the end of the day, seems to be more often than not unable to defeat this organization on its own. So that's my issue. I understand where the professor came from. I understand that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it shouldn't be that important. But at the same time, the politics of the party politics of the country essentially runs the fate of the country. And to not be involved is basically saying, well, let's turn a blind eye to that and have our fate decided by other people. We cannot get the law enforcement that we need if the people in charge just continue doing what it is that they're doing. That's ultimately, every time someone says we have other problems that we need to find solutions for, the brick wall that you're going to run straight head first into every time, whether it's education, the economy, tourism, agriculture, food security, law enforcement, the judiciary, what have you, is that if the political leadership does not have a will to do its necessary changes to help deal with the situation and to hold the public servants to account, nothing will get done. You can have all the initiatives you want.
Sean, I'm not disagreeing with your point, but your point and the caller's point from Morvar go hand in hand. And that isn't it, you know, from what I gathered from what you said and what the caller has stated. But it's not that we're calling for less involvement, you know, and less awareness or participation. But I think the point the caller is trying to make is until we see a substantial difference and until we see something that is worth change, there will always be frustration. Things will remain the same. And I think the point that the caller is making is that even if you take a look at the transition from Dr. Keith Rowley to Stuart Young, there may be a lack of confidence in Stuart Young in the sense that because he has been groomed by Dr. Keith Rowley for leadership of the party, there is a lack of confidence there. So both your points go hand in hand. It's not a matter of less participation or less involvement. It's a matter of I want to see something different.
Not completely. Yes, I want to see something different, but I'm not going to get it by ignoring the situation. If I leave party politics as is to function as is, we're going to get more of the same. We're going to get more of the same. It doesn't matter how much you think the PNM is bad, corrupt, occult, or what have you. They win more than the UNC. So obviously, just ignoring them is not going to help the situation.
But I think that's one of the points that the caller was making, at least from what I gathered.
No, he said it doesn't matter who is the leadership of the PNM, and I'm saying it does. I'm saying even if we're not members...
But Mr. San Fernando said, who cares? Mr. San Fernando said, who cares?
Because,
you know,
because
it's a matter of if we see something different taking place, you are going to trigger a lot more involvement.
No. But the problem is, if we show indifference to what's taking place now, they're never going to change. That's why they've never changed. In the 60-something years of this country's history, the more indifference that we show the government, we raise the price of gas, they ain't right yet. We are the less corrupt party. They have no incentive to change. And if we say, well, it doesn't matter who the leadership is, it doesn't matter to us, then they will do what they want, and we will be force-fed what we have been force-fed for the last however many years. That's my stance on it. And so I can't see where they're not... The less participation part of it that I'm making, this is to some extent, that's what it looks like, even how we discuss it in the media. Because if we decide we don't want to discuss it, we want to kind of leave it on the back foot because there are more important things to talk about, then the population will discuss it less, and then the politician will say, we are free reign because we could basically go against our own constitution and they ain't going to riot yet. That's basically what's going to be, because the diehards will go along with whatever it is. And the dissidents will just not vote. They won't turn to any alternative. They just won't vote.
Point taken.
All right. I mean, if you still want to disagree, I'm not going to fault you, but I will just say this. To close the show, I don't know if Stuart Young is a good candidate for Prime Minister. I think one of the things that may have allowed this government to function into whatever degree it did is the fact that Dr. Keith Rowley had a Stuart Young. Who's going to be Stuart Young? Stuart Young. And just because you're good as a lieutenant doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader. I don't know about you, Keaton. I have two people who I would be very much curious to see how they would do. Not Penelope Beckles. Two people who I would like to see, and maybe they would fail, as political leader, PNM, and Prime Minister. I'm not going to say who they are, in part because I don't want to put a target on their back because The nail
You
that
say
sticks up gets...
you say you have two people and then you don't want to call.
I don't want to... No, because the nail that sticks up gets to be pounded down, right? You've heard the stories, I would say, to people basically being complaining about, hey, you're making the rest of us look bad. And then the political career is basically over, right? So I don't want to go there. And I'm not saying these people are perfect. They have their flaws. But to me, they have shown important leadership functions that I don't necessarily see from their peers. So to me, I would kind of agree with Mr. San Fernando. We had the best of what's there. Those are the two who I think have the most potential as leaders. I think Stuart Young is a technocrat. I don't know if he's a leader. And other people have said similar things.
I think we have a leadership crisis in this country.
Overall.
I think we have a leadership crisis in this country. And I think we have an issue in respect to young people wanting to participate and be involved. But you're going to have to stimulate that process. I mean, put it this way. Would Stuart Young gather the attention of young people? Could Stuart Young raise... If Stuart Young could actually gain the attention or the interest of young people, believe me, he has a very good chance of winning that election. But again, at this point, things are still fresh. Things are still very immature. I didn't want to say things are still young, so things are still very immature. I know in time.
Well, you're right. They are. In more ways than one, they're still young, Keaton.
I still think that, I mean, there are other issues, like you know, this state of emergency, and the TTP is saying that you know, we've seen some success thus far.
Yeah.
Great. So tomorrow's the 10th, and we may not hit double figures of murders before the 10th, which is good. I think that, okay, fine, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without the state of emergency, I have question marks about that. But the mere fact is, we are in a state of emergency. It doesn't necessarily feel that way. How are you measuring success? It's been 1 week, and with all the intelligence gathering, and with all of how Tobago was so small, you mean to tell me those who assassinated Randall Hector still have not been found, still have not been charged? Where are the leads in that investigation taking you to? You know, so you can say that we have detained so many people, and we've taken off, 22 guns off of the street. Kudos, 22 guns off. I'm glad
that's not a success, Keaton. That is not a success.
It doesn't help the situation in respect to the high-powered weapons that are still plaguing Trinidad and Tobago. You know, there's a lot to be done to the TTPS. We support you. We support you. Careful how you are reporting to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because that could go very much against your favor, as I think the statements have some success thus far. Anyway, perhaps we're being too harsh. I don't know. Only time will tell. That's been my mantra. Only time will tell. I'm waiting for the course of this. It's only been a week and a half. Let's see what happens during the course of the state of emergency.
360 people have also been arrested. We have to wonder, is that going to be 360 lawsuits in about, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe? Well, it all depends. Let's wait and see on that. But folks, thanks to all the callers. Thanks to Keaton Shah for joining me. Remember your allegiance to the Republic. And it's nice to be nice. I'm trying to be nice to the politicians, even though they're making decisions that leave me bewildered. But Keaton, close out the show, please.
I remind you, today's a good day to have a good day, and make it great. Make it work for yourself. In one way or the other, find an opportunity, seize it, and have a good day. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.